You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 148. I often have parents and students feedback to me that the skills that they pick up from my trainings and programs are also really helpful in uni, but having no actual teaching experience at that level, I tend to avoid getting too much into those sides of things. So when Dr. Hilary Coleman emailed me, who is a former school teacher turned senior uni lecturer, I figured that having her perspective could be really valuable to link those things together. So if your teen is planning on or considering university after high school or college, and you'd love to make the transition as smooth as possible and set your teen up for their best possible success at uni, then this episode is for you. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Dr. Hilary Coleman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's really nice to be here.
Absolutely. Now, we have not actually ever met before, but when you emailed me sharing your experience and your expertise, I thought that conversation together could be really valuable to our listeners. So rather than me reciting maybe just from your email or from your website, perhaps you'd be happy to introduce yourself and your experience and your expertise and how you help students and parents.
Yeah, no worries. I, as you said, my name's Hilary, and I have been a former school teacher, and I'm now currently a university lecturer. I really love teaching. So I started off doing a PhD in research chemistry, which I did love, but I just fell in love with teaching. So I ditched that. And I worked for the government for a few years, but I just missed teaching so much that I went back to school teaching, but I missed research a little bit. So I've come back to now being an education-focused academic. But one of the things I really noticed working full-time permanently on both sides of that school to uni transition is that a lot of students, kind of unnecessarily in my opinion and my experience, just find it way more challenging than they should. And we know that some of the stats from the literature actually supports that. And I came across your podcast, and I really liked, listening to some of the themes that you were tying in the sense that, we're not giving out something that's like secret information that's hidden, and we've somehow like acted like spies and we're committing espionage by getting this out to the people who need it. Like, it is information that's kind of all there that really helps people either with their study, so they're working smarter, not harder, or with that transition to kind of more independent study at uni. But I think the challenge is it's really hard for students at the right time to have that information because it's very overwhelming and it's not always obvious where to look. And so
I think it's one of those, I think one of the things that crossed over, like really resonated with me when I read your email was that I think what we have in common is it's trying to uncover for people and shine a spotlight on the things where it's, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't even necessarily know to go looking for it.
Exactly. Yes, that's such a good way to put it. And I think based on the work that you do, I'm certain that it's true that a lot of your students are hugely benefiting from those study skills that you're giving them. And so the thing that I'm really trying to do is there are a lot of things outside of purely the academics of university that are those things I'm really trying to shine a spotlight on. And so in my not very large spare time, I'm sure all of us are kind of doing this in nights and weekends. I have a side business, but really it's a passion project for me. And it is just trying to highlight some of those things so that people can feel better prepared when they're heading to uni, so they don't end up as one of those unfortunate stats, essentially.
Yeah, because you mentioned that you've worked a lot in the pastoral side of university with students, as well as, of course, the academic side. But you said there were a lot of things that you felt like really need to be known or should be known or would just be beneficial to know that are a little bit unclear, or I think you maybe have used the word opaque somewhere. I'm sure I saw that, which can cause challenges for students if, they are unaware of them, maybe there are hurdles or challenges that crop up. So could you share a little bit about what those experiences are that you've seen and what your role in uni is that helps students with those things, and we can sort of piece those parts together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's all about illuminating them so that we can get some strategies in place, basically, so people can be aware. One of the biggest ones that I actually find is really challenging that oftentimes some parents may not be aware of is this idea of communication and how it links into a sense of community and well-being. And so I speak to a lot of students, particularly if they're recently arriving from school, who have just felt this really quite big loss of a sense of community. And oftentimes I'll say to them, well, when I was full-time school teaching, I have in loco parentis duty of care for my students. And so whether it was as a form teacher or teaching science or chemistry, I would proactively reach out to parents if the student in my class was not traveling well. And it might even be that I felt like they've just not been that happy recently, like anything from that to they're not attending or they're not submitting their formative homework or they've just failed a test or whatever it happens to be. And so there was a really strong sense of communication in both directions between myself and the student and their caregivers at home. And then when those things weren't going so well, we would put a proactive plan in place together as all of the people who are invested in this person's study. Whereas on the flip side, as a uni lecturer, we have the Privacy Act in Australia. And as a university staff member, it actually prevents me from sharing any information with anybody else without the student's express consent.
Yeah, wow,
And
that's a big
so
change, isn't it?
yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where, a lot of students, we want them to kind of experience that independent study and they're heading into adult life and it's really exciting.
Mhm.
And so I'm certainly not suggesting that parents should sort of, go and extract all of this information from their children, and neither would they want to necessarily. But I think a lot of students in particular, and perhaps families as well, don't necessarily have much visibility on just how much of a difference that sudden lack of communication will make. And it's maybe worthwhile having a conversation with your child, or if you're a student who's heading off to uni, just having that conversation early about what that might look like. So parents won't know their child's timetable necessarily. They won't know what subjects they're enrolled in necessarily. They won't know how many subjects, whether the child has to attend in person or doesn't have to attend, if they are attending. I've had parents who I know personally who've had children fail multiple units in a semester and haven't found out until after the fact,
Yeah,
just because
wow.
there's obviously no one at the uni communicating back in the
Hmm.
other direction.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges I've seen for families who finding that transition challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And that whole idea of communication and having that, yeah, that sense of privacy or security and independence for the student versus, having a support network and having some other, I guess, branches to be able to sort of grab onto or for other people to be able to help out with is definitely a big change. It's certainly a big difference to it, how it is going from high school. So I can completely understand
Mm.
that. And I know that you'd mentioned in your email and some of the information that I've picked up since that I think there was a particular statistic that you mentioned about like the impact that can have and the success rate or the sometimes the lack of success that students
Mm.
then experience when some of those things like do fall through the net, and what that means for students. So it was a quite surprising statistic. Maybe you can share that with
Mm.
us. Not that we want to scaremonger people, but I think if we, like we said, if we spotlight that and then we can move on to those proactive solutions and the positive steps that we can take.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess, one of the additional challenges with not knowing what you don't know is that a
Mhm.
lot of people tend to think it's other people that this happens to. And I guess what I'm sort of saying is, it could happen to anybody. So yeah, the stat that you might be talking about is that even 9 years after commencing an undergraduate degree in Australia, roughly 30% of students won't have completed
Yes,
that degree.
that is it, which was just really
Um,
surprising to me. And I'm imagining, in fact, maybe I won't even put out my own thoughts. You can share, like, is there any pattern or what have you noticed with the types of students that maybe end up falling into that category? Like, what are some of the patterns or some of the things that you've potentially noticed? Or is it really just,
mhm,
this really can, like you said, happen to anyone? What's the
mhm.
situation, do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, you can really do a massive deep dive into the data. So there's a lot of things breaking down to different variables. So,
Mhm.
the age of the student, whether they're an international student or a domestic student, how many units they're taking per semester, if they're doing part-time work, their gender, their entry ATAR, all of those things can contribute. And I guess, we want to avoid sort of saying you've fallen into this category and therefore this will happen to you, because that's,
Of course,
not a good use of those statistics.
definitely.
But there certainly are, like, a lot of the students who I talk to, um, it can be a useful thing. A lot of them perhaps might not be certain about what they want to study at uni. And again, it's very hard to know what that study and what that perhaps career going on from that will be like until you're in it. And I would say that's actually not a bad part of that statistic. If there are people who are deciding that there's a better pathway for them, or they're changing their course or something like that because they've made a proactive choice, that's actually really, really positive. The difficulty, I guess, for me, and the sad part of that is there's actually, I think, a large proportion of those students who just get stuck in the system, and they ending up kind of being reactive rather than making good choices in advance for themselves. Some of that, I think, comes from, I guess, not being ready for that independent study and perhaps not enjoying what they're studying. And there's a bit of a snowball effect there, because once you've been unsuccessful in a unit, it's much harder for you to complete, like the stats show that. And a lot of those students actually feel, they take a big hit to their self-confidence, which I find personally really sad, because I think we could avoid that for them just by doing a few things a little differently. I guess on the ATAR front, there's a really strong correlation between a student's entry ATAR and their university success, which I guess kind of makes sense in a lot of cases. Again, some people aren't at the right headspace at the time to kind of smash school out of the park, but have a different pathway and do a really great job. So, that's certainly not to say that people can't be successful. But I guess on the flip side there, if we pick, an ATAR of roughly 80 to 89, that entry ATAR, even after about 6 years, roughly a quarter of those students still won't have course completed. And so I talk to a lot of parents of students who, are really diligent and they've got those great study skills. They might even, be quite perfectionistic. They've got high standards for themselves. But even, a quarter of those students will find it really hard. And sometimes for those students, it is around that, those expectations for themselves. They're really hard on themselves when they don't do as well as they want to in an assessment. And we kind of get into that space of saying, well, in the adult world, it's very hard for us to be able to do everything that we want. Life is always about priorities. And so kind of switching that mindset to, what can you manage being, studying smarter, not harder. And that it's okay sometimes to not have done as well as you would like to, and that you don't want to let that derail basically your future study.
100%. And I think the thing that really stood out there is that whole idea of, like, a lot of the students are going to be studying very diligently. And if we talk about, let's just say the listeners for this podcast, a lot of parents that listen to this have got students or have got children who are already studying really hard. They're doing everything they kind of are told to and that they think they need to. What are some of the things that you see happening for those students that maybe they wouldn't have, either maybe sort of caught them off guard or ends up presenting some sort of challenge? And then we'll talk about, what are some proactive steps or just areas to be aware of that can help maybe mitigate those, or at least make people aware of them before they become a problem.
Yeah, so that's a really great point. I mean, there's two things in particular for that kind of cohort that you just described that I see really commonly. And one of them actually, applies to absolutely everybody, but particularly for those students coming in who are already being diligent and just, ticking all the boxes. I think one of the biggest things I've recognized for that cohort is they often come in from school, again, being quite used to their community. And one of the aspects of that is having people who they already really trust and who already know them really well, knowing how to give them support. And a lot of that support is actually completely available in the university system. So there are people who will provide pastoral care. There are people who will provide mental health support. There are people who will provide support with finding housing or navigating your timetable, or, even if you just think, I just don't know what to do. I've got open electives. I've never really had much choice before. I've got these career goals, but I just don't really know how to marry that up. There is so much different support out there for these students, but they will never have met any of the people delivering that support. They might not know how to find those people. They might be sitting behind a swipe card access place with a generic inbox rather than being an individual. And so I find that those students sometimes find taking that first step and reaching out for support really challenging, because they are really used to being successful in their own world, and they are successful, and that's definitely the case. But it can feel kind of, I guess, a lot more. Sometimes I find with those students, they're a bit more reticent to reach out for that support because they also view it as a bit of a failure. They think, if I'm having to ask for this help, it means I'm not succeeding and I'm not doing well. One of the things I talk to a lot of students about, and also at schools, is about reframing that. So saying, think if we've got the Winter Olympics going at the moment, you're an elite athlete. If you could get any coach that could come and get you that little bit closer to that gold medal, of course you would take that support. Like, you are the champion, you have those goals. And ultimately the students, student services fees have paid for all these things. So they should be viewing those as the things that they should drop in and get support with when they need it, so that they can get further with what they want and they can have success, they should not be viewing it as a failure. And the other thing is we wouldn't be employed. Like if there were no students asking us for help, I would not have a job. I really like my job. So yeah, I think it's sort of it's not that you need kind of a form teacher who you've known since year 7, who knows all your siblings, who calls your mum and dad by their first name. But those people are there to help you. And so you can feel confident in reaching out for that help.
Yeah, I think that I really like the way you frame it. And I think it's a really good point in that number one, yeah, if we were to take your analogy, and I love a good analogy, so this is perfect. We were in like elite athletes, no matter where they are at in, on the scale of their sport, they will have a nutritionist, they'll have a sports coach, they'll have a fitness coach, they'll have a mindset coach. They have all of that support, and in no way is anyone judging them, thinking, "Oh, well, gosh, couldn't they just do this themselves?"
Yeah,
That's all
absolutely.
part of that that pathway in life for them. And I love that you also said, like, I mean, and of course, higher education fees are huge. It's like you're paying for this. There is someone who is getting paid to do this job, and their job is to be that support or give you that guidance or whatever it might be. And so it's like just go get it. Like it's already
Mm-hmm.
yours, just go grab it and go find it.
Yeah.
So are there any other things that maybe we haven't covered so far that you think would be just good for parents or students to either hear about or know about that you've sort of seen in your experience or anything else? Like if you were to sit down with someone and go, "Hey, I've got like 10 minutes with you before you go off into the world and
Yeah.
off to uni, what are there any other things that maybe we haven't covered off on yet that you feel are like on the need to know list?"
Yeah, I mean, we just discussed this earlier too. I have a course that's a series of videos that is like the ultimate university preparation for students and the
Yes, I
parents
was
who
going to
like to
get to
see it.
this. This is perfect.
And
This is a good
yeah,
time
I'll
to
give
bring this
you.
in.
Yeah, so definitely if any of your listeners that for free if they would like. So if they don't feel like they've got what they need out of this 10 minutes, that's there. I guess the only other thing might be, I suppose, that I see a lot of students struggle with, particularly if they're coming from that school space, even students who are really well prepared and have those independent study skills, is there are a lot of, I guess, bespoke things that we're able to do for students in the school space simply because we've got far fewer students. So, I might have still been teaching 6 classes when I was at school, and that would be full time, but, there might only be 20 to 25 students in each of those classes. Whereas now, as a unit convener, but the very first unit that I convened had 470 students in it. And
Wow.
so you kind of think about, even if I have a class of 20 students and maybe 10% of them in any given week miss a class and just need me to catch them up on something or need me to email something to them they've missed, or, they have a big family event, which I know about because I know them and their siblings and their family. And, we've spoken about it in advance and I need to run something for them at a different time. Even if it's that 10%, that's still only 2 students per week in a class. But a lot of the university educators who your students will be seeing soon, and the children of the parents who are listening will be seeing soon, if I counted that for my unit, I'd have 47 students a week who need me to do some extra admin for them.
Yeah.
And it just becomes something that's not manageable, not because the staff member doesn't want to help, but because it's just impossible with that sheer volume. And
Mm.
so there become a lot of things that are seemingly small, but could actually, if they're small admin tasks, impact a student's ability to be successful. Like if they're missing deadlines for things that they need to participate in and it's not possible to keep opening things up, you could easily have a student who ends up failing a unit. And it seems like a small admin task and the convener seems like they're being a horrible person, but it's just that the scale of it is really different. On top of that, I think some school students think that their teachers at uni and their teachers at school are kind of effectively the same. But obviously, as school teachers, you and I would know, you have to get a full education degree, you've got professional development, you're looking at pedagogy, and you really have that pastoral care front and centre. Whereas as a university educator, like I happen to have a degree because I did school teaching first, but in most cases, there's no need to have a degree in education. And most of the university educators, whether they're an academic or perhaps a sessional staff member who's doing a PhD, for a lot of those people, they'll at least at a minimum have a split focus with teaching and research, but a lot of them actually have more research that they're doing than teaching. And so that's a really positive thing because we want our young people to be exposed to those new disciplines and cutting edge research and the things that they're really interested in. But, people aren't superheroes. They can't do both. And so just recognizing that you're not necessarily going to get those same things from both sets of staff can really help set those expectations early, I think.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think just drawing back on, this is probably something we can get into a little bit more, is drawing back on that. You have that dual experience. You have the experience as a school teacher, you have the experience as a lecturer and working in a university setting. What are some of the things that you like? What are some of the maybe subtle differences or subtle changes that you see? It definitely, there's the communication, and there's obviously that sort of difference in the relationship and the essentially the number of students that a lecturer or a convener is working with. What are some of the, like, are there other small differences that you've sort of noticed that in hindsight now, having been in both of those roles, you can really kind of see, even if they're small, they sometimes feel big.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the ones even had students now comment to me about. I'm really fortunate. I work at the University of Canberra, and I have so many colleagues who really love their teaching role. So that's really refreshing and really excellent. But it is, I have students say, like, they get to their third year of uni and they still might only have a couple of people who know their name by that stage. And these might be, people who perhaps have been a little more timid in approaching staff. And, that might be a reason. If you're kind of one in a sea of 470 and you don't ever speak to a staff member, then that's less likely that that relationship will form. But I think coming from that school background, I would learn all my students' names straight away, not least because, if someone's misbehaving in double year 9 science on a Friday afternoon and you can call their name out, then better for you. But now, that connection, I think, really makes a difference. And it's not necessarily that same focus on connection that's there between staff and students at uni. I mean, you hope it grows organically because students are interested and certainly staff are willing to engage. So if you proactively are attending drop-ins and asking questions during tutes, there's no chance that people won't know who you are. So again, it's entirely possible to cultivate that community, but it is more on the student to cultivate it rather than the teachers cultivating it. And if you haven't been in an environment where you've had to do that before, I think it can feel quite different and quite overwhelming and quite isolating.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm now likening that back. I'm thinking back to my experiences, like as a teacher, and it was on me. I remember, I'd be sitting in the evenings and
Yeah.
looking through my class list and literally memorizing and, getting someone to test me on the names and like trying to remember all of those names. That was like on me. And that was part of my responsibility really as being a good teacher. And then on the flip side, I'm thinking years and years back when I did my first degree before I went into teaching, I honestly don't think any lecturer would have known. It doesn't really, I don't take that offensively. I just think that's how it was. Like you
Yeah.
said, there's hundreds of us. I don't think anyone would. I can't think of any lecturer who would have actually known particularly who I was or what my name was. And thankfully that wasn't really a problem. I kind of just accepted that's how it is. But I can definitely see, and I guess back then as well, even in high school, things were a little bit different to what they are now. You didn't have as much of that personal communication. But I can definitely see therefore the switch in that these days with how that would feel really, really different. So for students that you see who are able to make that transition really successfully and you just observe them going on to be able to embrace everything that university has to offer and they are engaging with their subject, hopefully if they found the right path. And like we said, if they haven't, there's definitely ways to address that. What are are there any sort of features or particular characteristics that you see with those students who are on that positive path and do seem to be able to take things and run with them and really make a success of things?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot in that, but I think one of the first things I can think of that is always the hallmark of a successful student, whether it, I don't necessarily saying if you do this, you'll definitely be successful, but is absolutely the starting point is the student proactively themselves able to manage their communication with the uni. And all I would say that looks like is once you know what your offer is and you've accepted it, you will be getting an email from the university with your student ID and how to log into their systems and information about, how to enroll, how to get a timetable, where to get student advice from. Once you've done all those things, you'll get added to all of your learning management systems for your units, and all of your subject conveners will start giving you information daily. So I would say if a student is logging in once a day to all of the systems that they need to, basically there's no chance they will miss information. And the students that I see really struggling, oftentimes a lot of them, like school, they're kind of in this zone where someone will remind me, like I'll go to the home group on Friday and, Miss Coleman will tell me, oh yeah, you have to hand this form in and this thing's due the next day. And all of those things are true. And that information is still there. Those reminders are all still there, but there won't be a person doing the reminding. And so
yeah, they won't be handing it to you on the plate.
Yeah, absolutely.
They won't be bringing it to you and putting it into your hand on a plate.
Yeah. And
That's
certainly,
it.
schools aren't spoon feeding students either. They're still in this sort of transitioning to adulthood mode. But yeah, but I think, yeah, if a student is prepared to be doing that, then they won't miss something. And they might still need a bunch of support and they might find that overwhelming, but they can at least be confident that they will have all the information they need and not miss something critical.
Yeah, I really think that's a good point. Just being ready to look for things and find things as opposed to waiting for someone to be
Yeah.
tapping you on the shoulder. And that's definitely going to be good advice. And I know that because I had a look into the course that you have kindly shared with our listeners. So Dr. Hilary has a free course. It's with her, as you mentioned, passion project. It's called Unilateral, isn't it? I
Yeah,
think
that's right. Yeah.
your business. So it's called The Ultimate Introduction to Uni. And maybe you could just give us a little outline of what it is. I went and had a look, and it gives you guys really practical, tangible information about what to expect, what that will look like, how things will happen. So, do you want to just give us a little rundown of what's in there so that if people want to go grab that, they can? We'll include a link for you. It's a long link, so I won't read it out here, but I will put it into the show notes. And if you are listening to this from being on my email list, I will pop it into the email as well, and you can go grab that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got a number of courses that can help both students and parents depending on where on the university journey they're at. But this one, based on your description for your cohort, I thought would be really, hopefully they'll find it valuable. It's essentially a university intro, so it's not into the nitty gritty of what students need to do kind of week by week when they're starting university. I do have a course for that too, but it's more kind of the preparation and things that students and their families and maybe even their school teachers might want to start thinking about if they're heading to uni, so sort of for 10, 11 and 12, years 10, 11 and 12. And as you say, it's kind of just got some of those bigger picture things, but also with applicable, I guess, suggestions for things that they need to start thinking about early to make that transition as smooth as possible. So it goes into a bit more detail about some of those invisible differences between school and uni that might trip students up. It talks about what makes up a university degree. It looks at how much time to study take actually, because a lot of students are really quite shocked when they find out how many hours they should be spending while still managing to see their friends and sleep and exercise and all those kinds of things. It even talks about, if you're not successful in a unit, which is, I guess, the equivalent of a subject, what might that actually look like for you and how to get support in that space. It talks about students who might be neurodivergent or suffer from anxiety or have a disability and reasonable adjustments and how to communicate with staff around that. Just a bunch of kind of hopefully valuable things that tend to be invisible before students come in. And yeah, so if they find it helpful, that's really great.
Yeah, a really good jam-packed bundle, but also in a really easily digestible format, which is definitely what we like around here. So, thank you so much, Hilary. I really appreciate you coming on and spending your time and sharing your experience and expertise and knowledge with us. And if people do want to get into this a little bit more or find out a little bit more about where they can get more information, where should they find you at?
So I have a YouTube channel. I think it's Unilateral, everything you need to know about uni. But I also have, you can email me, info@unilateral.com.au. That's all good too. And I've got a
Beautiful.
website. If you like, I can give you the details if you want to.
Well, we'll link it all up. It's all going to be good. So thank you again. I hope that for everyone listening, that this has been helpful to you and given you one or two little insights or bits of, I guess, pathways to help sort of see things a little bit more clearly as you move forwards. I know that some of this stuff can feel a little bit overwhelming or just different if we've never been in that space before. So I could completely understand that. So thank you again, Hilary, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Katie. You too.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye. If you're ready to have your teen achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.